Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this fine Thursday afternoon. Very pleased to have some very special guests with us here today. And today we are going to talk about building modern Jamstack solutions that need e-commerce using Snipcart and Agility CMS. And this is actually a talk that sort of got sparked by one of our previous webinars that Flora and I were doing together, where we were just talking about different ways of building e-commerce sites these days. And she had actually brought up Snipcart, and then we actually had some folks from Snipcart who joined as attendees and reached out to us. So it was really great to connect with you guys. Also, Snipcart being another fellow Canadian company, an extra bonus there. So got a couple Canucks with us here today, and Flora is visiting us from Seattle.
Yes.
Yeah. So we're gonna get started here, but we'll do a couple introductions first so that everyone knows who we are. If you don't know me yet, my name is James Vidler. I'm the VP of Product. If you've seen some of our other webinars, you may have seen some previous talks that I've given. I'm really big into Jamstack right now. I think it's a great way to build a lot of different types of websites. And it's just so exciting to see all the changes and things that are happening right now in this space. I'm also on the side a VR developer. I have a game on the Oculus Store that I'm continuing to hone. So if any of you are interested in VR development or where to get started or anything like that, let me know too. I'm always happy to lend a hand there. And then we have Flora, who's I'm very excited to have her join us once again for another webinar. We've worked together a couple times now, doing a Jamstack Seattle meetup, as well as the last one we've done in e-commerce. And she's a full stack software engineer at ZipWhip, and she's building some pretty cool stuff, including some Electron apps, which I think is pretty cool.
Yep.
So welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Mm-hmm. What's the weather like out there in
it's
Seattle?
kind of cold. I haven't been out for a couple of days though, so I don't really know.
Not many of us have, and trust me, if it wasn't for that dog right there sitting behind me, I probably would never leave the house right now. And last but not least, our very special guest, Charles Ouellet. He is the co-founder and lead developer at Snipcart. Really happy to have you here today. Another co-founder of a Canadian tech startup.
Happy to be here.
You guys have been around. Yeah, you guys have been around for a bit now, and have had some changes in the way that you do things too. And I think we talked earlier about how Jamstack really seems to sort of line up with what you guys are doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, when we started Snipcart initially, there was like no Jamstack at that point. It was just like static site generators and stuff like that. And we started to make like content marketing around some of these tools. I remember the first one that we tried, it was Middleman, and it was for years, it was our most popular blog post on our blog. And then we decided to write more about these stacks. And we ended up talking with the folks at Netlify and like got into the Jamstacks since the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Did Snipcart ever did you ever really focus on like jQuery and stuff back in the day, or is that?
Actually, the first two versions of Snipcart were using jQuery a lot. I mean, we were using Backbone and the old like front-end frameworks, so it was like the default to use. But we
I mean that was just how you did things back then.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't, you didn't want to write JavaScript at that point. You just wanted to write like jQuery and don't use too much of document everything. That's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. I look back at some old code now, and it's like, man, this is so overly complicated. You can just write actual JavaScript.
Yeah. I think that the components-based frameworks really help making it even better and more approachable for new developers nowadays.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so today I just want to sort of cover what we're going to chat about. We're going to look at essentially how like a traditional e-commerce solution typically works, because I think that's really important to understand sort of how things typically are done or used to being done, and sort of how there's a sort of new wave or new evolution of being able to do things in a much simpler way. And we can look at some of the benefits of these sort of modern approaches. And I specifically want to take a much closer look at how Snipcart works, and also really how that sort of ties in with Agility CMS. So bear with me here. I'm going to go through some sort of review. We're going to just make sure that we understand how all these work, and it really will set up the stage for Charles, who can then sort of share his screen and walk us through how you can build a site with Agility and Snipcart and have a awesome e-commerce solution. Sound good, guys?
Yep.
All right. So let's do it. So before we dive too far in, I just want to take a moment here to sort of talk about the vision that we have at Agility CMS, and really the reason behind why we do anything. And we believe, and we're striving to get to a place where we can have a world where you never have to rebuild your website from scratch. And that comes from this sort of content first approach of, you use a CMS to be able to manage all of your content. And that content doesn't have to be aware of how that is going to be presented. It's just content. And then that way you can sort of have a site or a place where you have all of your content that can live for years or decades, while your front end or your presentation layer or the websites or the apps in which you use to present that content can change and evolve over time. Like today, we're talking about building sites using Jamstack. A couple months from now, there could be this whole other thing, right? You don't want to have to sort of tear down and migrate everything every single time you want to do this. Really, the benefits of a CMS is, that long-term return on investment, where you keep the same backend and just iterate and experiment with your front end, so you never get out of date. And we really believe that the success of any CMS implementation really depends on three things. Number one is the user experience. And I'm not really talking about the user experience in the CMS, although that is important. I'm talking about the user experience of what you actually deliver to your customers, right? The end result, the whole reason why you actually have a website or an app is to nail that user experience, the people actually using your product. But secondary to that is the editor experience. How can you actually manage that content? And that's really where the CMS sits here. Is we believe in order to get that truly great user experience, you need to have an amazing editor experience. Everything needs to be controlled in a CMS environment. You shouldn't have to require a developer to do certain changes. It really should just sort of work out of the box and give that editor the ability and the tools to be able to do what they do best, which is create great content and iterate on that content and do experiments to be able to perfect that user experience. And then lastly, we really do think that the developer experience is very important too. And that's because, no one wants to work with a CMS where that's really hard to work with. The developer experience needs to be good because that can help also influence the user experience. In a lot of other traditional CMSs, the developer is somewhat constrained into what they can actually do with the system. So we believe they shouldn't be constrained. They should be able to build things the way that they want to build something to achieve that user experience, but not sacrifice that editor experience. So I just want to take a moment to talk about that a little bit and set the stage for what we're going to talk about next. But first, some questions. What is Jamstack and why is this a thing? Because I think this is important to really drive this point home. Even though it may be reviewed for some people, we have to realize that Jamstack is still a fairly new thing. Not everyone knows exactly what it is. They may have heard about it, but they may not really fully understand what it's all about. So let's just take a moment to talk about this a little bit. So the Jamstack, what does it stand for? Well, it is JavaScript, APIs, and markup. Stands for the jam in the stack there. So essentially, you build your site essentially just using JavaScript. That means you're not using PHP, you're not using .NET or Java or anything like that. And the result is you can build really lightning fast sites. And that's essentially because Jamstack compiles to static HTML files that are pre-compiled for each page before it's even deployed to your web server. So your web server doesn't actually have to do any computational work to provide you content. It's just showing you the content that's there. And that really is a pretty big departure from how traditional sort of dynamic server rendered sites have been built for years. And those have some inherent challenges with them because, as a request comes in and you have a dynamic web server, it's going to do some things to go and get some content and return it to the user. If they don't do that fast enough, that can result in slow load times, lost conversions, all that bad stuff that nobody really wants. So if you're on the internet and you're on a website and you're like, oh man, this website's so fast, it's super snappy, take a look at the source code. I bet you they're probably using some form of static site generation. Jamstack will give you much more secure sites as well. So they're going to run on a static host, which means, there is no opportunity for there to be some code that gets injected that automatically changes your content or inserts some sort of, cross-site script vulnerability or something like that. It's just way more secure when you don't have a backend that you need to worry about. And ultimately, when you build a site with Jamstack, it's so much cheaper to run because you're not paying for dedicated beefy web servers that need to process things. You really just need a place to store files. And so you can use a plethora of different hosting providers to do that, and they're super, super cheap. Essentially, you just end up paying for bandwidth, which is pennies, literally pennies or fractions of pennies per gigabyte that you end up using. So you can save. Like we have actually talked with some enterprise customers that are changing from a sort of a typical dynamic web server setup to a Jamstack setup, and they're saving literally thousands of dollars a month, not even a year. So certainly something to look at there. And then lastly, it really just enables better UIs, takes advantage of the modern development tools, enables developers to do more faster. It just seems to be moving towards the future where a lot of developers are picking this up, and they can do the best thing possible with their ability.
Yeah. Can I add one more thing?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So like touching on the, when we say Jamstack and we always mention static site generators and that, I feel that it's, one tends to think that they are not dynamic sites and all that, but that's not the case. I just want to kind of drive home that they're not, static sites, that they don't have things that change or that the user can interact with them. That's where I think the part of the APIs is really important, because inside of a static page, you can have integration with different APIs that are doing things on the fly that make that kind of dynamic feel to the app and all that. So it's not that they're, just one thing that you never update. And also think about, we're going to be implementing an e-commerce today, so that needs to be dynamic, right? Because you can change the amount of products that you have, or the price, or anything. So one interesting thing is how that we can actually update the site, that static site, pretty fast, because one of the other things that the Jamstack has is that it lets you, it has a great developer experience in the sense that you make a change and it rebuilds the entire site super fast. So you deliver what you need to deliver pretty fast. So that's one thing. And then another thing that I wanted to add is for JavaScript, it's just plain JavaScript, so vanilla JavaScript, or it also kind of you can use any framework that is JavaScript. So anything about JavaScript. So yeah,
that's a great point there. Thanks for clearing that. Just because you have a site that's static like a Jamstack site doesn't mean you can't have dynamic data working in there.
Right.
It just means that that's happening on the client side.
Yeah, you can have a Jamstack site can have users logging in and that, and those are things that I think that people kind of tie in their heads with a dynamic server-side generated site. You need sessions and that sort of thing, but you can implement APIs that will help you achieve sessions and that, such as Auth0, and there are others, and you can still have all the benefits of a Jamstack site. So yeah, just keep that in mind.
Yeah, it just takes a different way of looking at things, right?
Yeah.
All right, so now that we've sort of covered that, let's look at how, just so we can contrast, how some traditional sort of e-commerce solutions typically look like sort of in the past. So, one is you sort of, you build your own website, right? You got your own website with your own code, and then you integrate with a third party to sort of handle certain aspects of your e-commerce. So like, we're looking, for example, companies that do this, like Magento, PrestaShop, WordPress, if you have WooCommerce. The idea is you have your own custom site, and then you sort of build an integration that works with those, that handles processing payments, managing products, etc. And your site code essentially needs to integrate with how those work. They're pretty good, and they're, they've been around for a long time because they work fairly well. However, there are some caveats to take a look at here. So you're going to have a bit less control over exactly how those work because you're integrating with that sort of third party. It's going to be pretty quick to deploy because you don't really have to write your own code, for example, to handle sort of checkout processes and that kind of thing there. And by that, you sort of offload security to that third party that, may provide you, hopefully they provide you some sort of iframe for payment processing, or some sort of, hosted payment page that can process that information. But, plus side too, payments are handled for you. You don't need to worry about that. But they need developers typically to do these kinds of integrations, and they're not necessarily easy. Some certainly are easier than others, but you really need to understand, or cheap, right. Yeah, for that matter, yeah.
It's like an expensive implementation, usually.
Yeah, and developers are also expensive as well.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And generally speaking, integrations can be hard, right? Whenever you're sort of integrating with a black box, you don't really have much control over them. The first time you do it, it's going to take a bit longer than usual. So there's something wrong with these sort of traditional approaches where you have a server rendered site that pulls products in real time from some other service and provides checkout flows there. Nothing wrong with that, but just be aware that it can be a little expensive. Another way to sort of, some traditional e-commerce sites have been around now for a while. They're like all-in-one solutions where you're just like, all right, I'm going to use someone that gives me a website and all of the e-commerce features sort of out of the box. So you sort of have one vendor that does everything. Some examples of companies that do this are like Shopify, BigCommerce, and Square. BigCommerce, I think, actually, is it Next.js that has an integration with BigCommerce now? I can't remember. Yeah, so I think BigCommerce is now starting to try to be more of like something that Headless, that JAMstack solutions can try to use, but they're still kind of just figuring that out. And for these, I have to say, like, if you're a small company, like especially like a small business, and you don't have the resources to hire a developer to build your website or anything like that, these really are some of the better ways to do this, because they are going to be fastest to deploy. You completely offload the security to a third party. They handle your website stuff too. They handle your payments. Usually you won't need developers at all for something like this. On the flip side, you do not have as much flexibility. That's because you aren't even able to really interact with the code base that powers your site. And they also typically have the highest transaction fees because they, the sort of initial cost might be low, but long term, as the more you use it, the more they'll sort of skim off the top. And you're sort of locked into that vendor, right? So at that point, it's like, okay, both your website and your e-commerce are this vendor. You can't really change one without changing the other, and you're kind of locked in there. But I do recommend that they're a great place to start for small businesses. If you're just trying out e-commerce for the first time, you're not really sure how it's going to work out. Great way to just get started, at least. Now let's talk about the Jamstack approach. And the different roles that sort of has in there. So the Jamstack approach is you build your Jamstack site using one of the many different types of frameworks. We really like Next.js. We've been talking that up a lot lately. Gatsby as well is another great option. 11t is starting to pick up a lot of steam for being a more sort of simplified, sort of back to basics native JavaScript implementation. Pretty cool. You should check that out. And then you so that's the sort of front end of your website, but that still needs to pull data from something, right? So you would then choose, some sort of headless CMS. We like Agility CMS. And then you choose your e-commerce provider. So, okay, who's going to do this sort of e-commerce? Where am I going to set up my products, set up my shipping, my orders, my checkout flow, all that kind of stuff. And there are two different ways of doing this. One is a sort of like an API-based solution where, think Gatsby, for example, like an API-based solution where it's like maybe if you had like Gatsby and Shopify, for example, you might use the Shopify source plugin in Gatsby so that when your site builds, before you deploy, it's going to go and pull down all the data it needs to from Shopify to be able to sort of populate all the data on your site. And then there's another way of looking at it, which is the sort of, I don't really know if this is the best way to explain it, but we call it like add-on buttons or scripts. The idea that you already have a site, you have a CMS, you don't really need to do too deep of an API integration. Instead, you can just sort of add some scripts and do some configuration and automatically sort of have those things work. And we're going to learn a little bit more about that approach with Snipcart and why that is such an interesting way to do e-commerce. I think you'll see how quick and easy it is to set up. So the Jamstack approach of e-commerce, you still get all the benefits of Jamstack: fast, secure, cheap, better UIs, and you have the flexibility to mesh best of breed solutions. You can choose the best framework you want, the best headless CMS for you, and the best e-commerce solution that's going to work for you. You don't have that vendor lock-in, and you really have a separation of concerns now between the content that I have, the code that I have, and the e-commerce stuff that I have. And this can be really valuable too, because you may have completely different teams that interact with those things. You may have a team of editors that just works with content. They just have access to the CMS. You may have a whole different e-commerce fulfillment team that just works in e-commerce, and they don't have to care about the code or the content. And you have developers who just work on the code. And that really helps separate things out, especially as your company grows. So you don't just have everyone doing everything all in one system. And then lastly, this really gives you the unlimited freedom and flexibility because you have full control over how all of that stuff can work. And I think you'll be pleasantly surprised about how quickly it is to actually set up integrations like this. And because of this, you're going to generally have more flexible pricing because you really get to pick and choose, what services you're going to use, what plans, what tiers, and all that cool stuff. Looking at the sort of API-based approach to e-commerce, this is sort of typically how something like this would work. You use e-commerce APIs to interface with things like the products, the shopping cart, and the checkout. So your CMS, will probably likely have to have some sort of integration with your e-commerce provider so that when people are in the CMS in content, they can sort of reference e-commerce products that you have in your e-commerce system, like, so that they can, create content that features content about a product, do campaigns around that product and that kind of thing. So your CMS still kind of needs to be aware of the e-commerce products. There are a lot of different ways you can do this. Agility, for example, has like a Shopify field that you can use that allows you to connect your Shopify instance to Agility so that you can search and select products from Shopify to be able to sort of link to in Agility. And then when that code is deployed, it sort of pulls the data from Shopify, pulls the data from the CMS, puts that in there, and then delivers it. This is a pretty involved approach. Like, you need to set up a custom field for the Shopify product, and you need to be very familiar with all the ins and outs of how that Shopify API works. So while it can be a good solution, it does certainly take a lot longer to set up and a bit more to maintain. Now let's look at the different way of looking at things similar to what Snipcart does. And the way that this works is it integrates with your existing front end. So you don't really need to call an API to get product data necessarily. You could actually just add scripts on your front end of your website and then be able to have things just sort of automatically start working on your site, where you can have the ability to sort of just have an add button where it just adds, an existing product that you're outputting on your site, and all of a sudden that's being added into a cart. And then you can hit checkout and boom, there's a checkout thing that pops up and you get to checkout. And you haven't written any of that code. You're just sort of injecting those scripts into your site while still having quite a bit of control over the appearance of those things. And so this is where we really want to introduce Snipcart, because we think it's a fascinating way to do an e-commerce solution. Some of the benefits here, when I asked Charles, is, it's tech agnostic, which means it actually works with any web-based tech stack. We're not just talking about Jamstack here. We're talking about any front end. Charles, you say you can customize the checkout experience. So does that mean as a developer, you have control over the CSS that sort of gets outputted on the checkout experience?
Yep, you can override our default CSS style sheet pretty easily. And since the V3, you can even override some templates in the card itself. So you can change you can add custom fields directly into the checkout. You can change how you want to display the summary of the card and stuff like that. I'm going to show some examples in my slides later, but yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, I'm looking forward to that. But yeah, you'll be able to show, you can really integrate it into any existing website, regardless of the tech stack. You don't have to duplicate your product inventory. So I think this is actually a great point you brought up here, Charles, is that, with the other example I gave of let's say you're using a site with Shopify, you may have content in your CMS that is marketing content around the product, right? You might have a gallery of images, maybe you have some other associated data around products. But now you have that information in your CMS, but you also have the same or similar information in Shopify. And then now those are really disjointed and can be difficult to manage over time, especially depending on how complex your sort of product taxonomy really becomes. So I think that's a great point that you highlighted there, is that you can sort of, with Snipcart, you can have a single source of truth where actually your CMS controls your products.
Exactly.
Snipcart doesn't control the actual information that your products have. You can actually set that information in your CMS, and then you just have to tell Snipcart a little bit about those products. So custom payment gateways let you write your own integration with any payment providers. That's pretty cool. Speaking from experience myself, we actually built an e-commerce solution for some customers, and it seemed like every other customer had a different payment provider that they wanted to bring to the table.
Yeah, exactly. And we're a very small team actually at Snipcart. Just a heads up, we are a bootstrap company, so we didn't take investment or anything like that. So we're a small team, and we get a bunch of requests every week to support the multiple payment gateways. So we decided that instead of trying to bundle them all, we're going to release a feature that allows developers to build their own implementations and go with that instead of waiting for us.
Yeah, that's great. I wish we did that because we spent a lot of time building integrations that only one customer uses.
Yeah.
And of course, as you know, each payment provider has slightly different ways of doing things. So that's really cool. And full feature set from the get-go. So you're saying that when you get to understand your pricing, it's not like you have like feature paywalls kind of thing where it's if you need this feature, you need to upgrade. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. When you sign up for Snipcart, you get access to all features, all new releases that we make, stuff like that. We don't that's well said, as you said it. We don't have paywalls or anything like that.
Right. Cool. And Flo, I remember when you played around with Snipcart to begin with. How was your experience with it?
It was amazing. I was so amazed because it was so fast. I played with and I've created e-commerce websites for different clients with different kind of solutions, and it was always a pain because there's so many things to take into account, just so many things. And it's just super simple to integrate. You're gonna see. I don't want to spoil anything. Yeah, just I have one question for you guys that I actually don't know. Do you support different languages on the card and everything and experience?
The dashboard itself is in English only for now, but the card can be translated in any languages, and all the local files are open source on GitHub, and we already have 20 something translations of the card. So we have French, Portuguese.
Oh,
Yes, we do too.
Spanish?
But you can also translate the card pretty easily and
Yes.
submit your contribution through GitHub, and we merge them every two weeks or so.
Oh, nice. Perfect. That's
Nice.
great to know.
So what I want to see here is actually how this all works. Get into nitty gritty of that, and for that, I'm going to give the reins to Charles, who's going to walk us through this. And I also want to start something new. I'm going to try to coin this term. We can call this the save and stack. Snipcart, Agility, Vercel, and Next.js.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I thought that was appropriate for an e-commerce talk. All right, so I'm gonna stop sharing here, Charles, and if you want to take over.
Yes. Okay, so you should see my screen. Yeah, I think I'm gonna start with the slides that I made. Since we were speaking about the story of Snipcart and the versions that we use with jQuery and all that stuff, I'm just gonna show you how Snipcart evolved through the years. Snipcart started in 2013, so we're like 7 years old now. And this is the first version of the card. So at the time it was pretty nice looking, but nowadays it's like not there. So we had to rework on that. So that's the V1 of Snipcart. And
that looks pretty nice to me.
Yeah, it's not that bad.
It's not bad for 7 years ago.
Yeah. So 3 years later, we released the V2, which basically was the same thing as the V1, but with some refactoring and more customization features for our customers. So that's some screenshots of the V2. Sorry, my computer is lagging. And
it looks good to us.
Last year we released the V3, so it's a complete rewrite. It's a all new card, so it's not like compatible with. It's compatible with V3. It's very easy to migrate, but it's a brand new experience. So this is our new checkout experience. So we think it's much more modern.
Beautiful.
And this is how it looks on a website. And when I was speaking about customization, these are examples from our customers that really changed the way Snipcart looks on their website. So we have this one in TrueTape, another customer who rebranded the card to make it look like native on their website.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious here. I have a question for you, just as a fellow person who also manages the product. You're talking about, like, you sort of went through different versions of this. How did you sort of handle customers that came on V1, and then sort of you came out with V2 and V3? Did they sort of how were they able to sort of take advantage of the new things? What did that look like?
Yeah, we still have lots of customers on V1 and V2, even though the V3 has been released for a couple of years. So we're still doing support for them. We don't release any new features, but we wrote a migration guide to explain how you can migrate from V2 to V3 easily. And we try our best to stay backward compatible. So the basic principles of Snipcart of having a buy button on your website, defining the product in the HTML, that's the same with the V3. So if you didn't customize the card so much, it's pretty simple. It's basically just swapping the script file for the V3 and stuff like that. But
nice.
Yeah.
So your backend dashboard, you sort of every customer is sort of on the same version of that. Is that how that works?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Cool.
So the cart and the dashboard are two isolated components. Yeah. So that was all for my slides. So now the interesting part, I'm gonna get into the code. Before digging into the code, I'm just gonna go through how I model the content in Agility, because I'm gonna show you all the models I created and all that stuff and how products are managed. So in Agility, the first thing I made was to create a new content definition, which is called product. So we can take a look at that. I basically included the basic info you usually have on a product, like its ID, the name, description, an image that you can attach, and of course the price of the product. And of course, I already created a few products in Agility. So I took all the products that you add in the starter kit with the Snipcart and Agility. So I reuse those products here. So here's my data. And then I created a module. This is something I really enjoyed about Agility. It's a pretty new concept for me, but a module is basically a component that you create in the CMS and that is then linked to a React component. In my case, since I use Vercel and Next, sorry. So I created two models. The first one is top products, which is a model that will allow us to pick 3 products that we want to showcase on our website. And the other one is products list, which is basically a list of all my products that I can then embed on the website. So the cool thing about the models is that when you design your pages, you can come to this page, for example, my home page, and you can drag and drop models as you want. So let's say that on my homepage, I wanted to show my top products under the hero image. I just have to click on the plus sign here, get my model and add it there, and then it will be automatically linked to my component in my next application. So that's basically what I do.
And there's just one point I just want to drive home there for the other attendees here is that you know, as a developer, you know, when you're building stuff using Agility and like doing integration with Snipcart, what you're actually doing is you're not building like static code that is going to output things in certain places on certain pages. You're actually giving editors the ability to create their own pages, and all you're doing is just providing them a list of modules or front-end components that they can sort of add on a page.
Mm-hmm.
So you're giving the users sort of tools to be able to go and build things themselves. So when you're building a website for someone, you're not really coding a website with like hard-coded routes or controlling exactly what content's on each page. You're giving that control to the editor themselves so that they can do all those things and not bother you as much.
Yeah, no, that's a concept that I really liked about the Agility. So yeah, that's nice. So before diving into the code, I'm just going to show you how our store is going to look after like 20 minutes. So basically we have our home page here. We have our top products here. You can add them to the cart. And we have a store section, which lists all the products. And we do have a cart menu item here that you can use to open the cart and see how many items you have in it. So it's all deployed on Vercel and ready to go. So let's
I think my hat's listed in there.
Yeah, it is. So it's time to look at the code. So first thing I have is my VS Code editor and the components folder. So speaking of the models, each model that I created in Agility needs to have their like associated components. So in my case, as you can see in the folder Agility models here, I have my top products component and my products list component. So if I go on my local dev here, you can see that for the moment, it's just an H1 with products list here. And if you go to store, but it's the same thing. So if I go back to my code, we're going to start with the top products. So in the top products component, since it's a model that is linked to a specific products in the CMS, you receive some properties in the component that are coming from Agility. In my case, I needed to use the fields property, which contains all my products. And then I'm mapping those products to a JSON object named products so that I have access to all the products that I want to display in my components. So for this example, I'm returning a simple div with the number of products that are going to be showcased on my home page. So if we take a look at the demo here on my local web server, we can see that we have 3 products to show.
Nice. Yeah, it's really nice how those fields just sort of come through automatically. Like you didn't have to do a lot of work to find out where those products are. They just sort of come in automatically.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing I had to do was to like start with the default starter kit with Next.js, and then add some env variables. It's a very hard word to pronounce it when you French. Okay, so the next step is that we're gonna make this component a bit nicer. So what I did is that I created another component that I'm gonna reuse in the products list later on. So this component is called product. So if we take a look at it, we can see that it uses some Tailwind helpers here to generate like a card, show the product image, the title, the price, and the description of the product. And then in my top products component, I simply iterate through my products and returning product components here. So if we take a look at the site now, we do have our top 3 products listed right here. And the next step is that we're going to include Snipcart because yeah, that's normal. Because it's nice so far. We do have like products, but there's no way to buy them yet.
So, yeah, there's no way to buy. Up until this point, essentially, nothing is communicating with Snipcart or anything at this point, right? We're just getting content from Agility.
Exactly. So what I did is that I went into the layout file, which is like the base layout of the site, and I added the Snipcart dependencies here. So here we have our style sheet, which basically styles the whole card. We do have our JavaScript file here that is required. And then we have to declare a div element, which is basically where Snipcart will be mounted when it needs to appear. And this is where you also define your API key, so that this is how we can know to which store this specific site is linked to. So this is a public API key, so it only gives users access to a subset of APIs, so there's no security concerns here. I mean, you can't like get orders history from a merchant with this API key.
Can I ask you, is there like an NPM module that can be used also to install it, or is it through the script tag always?
Yeah, for now it's through the script tag,
Gotcha.
but we are really interested into having like an NPM model eventually. This is something that we have been discussing and like considering for a while now, but yeah, I'm pretty sure this will be coming maybe in the next year, but pretty soon.
Cool.
So that's how I added Snipcart dependencies. So now we're gonna create our buy button. So if I go back to my product component, which is right here, as you can see, I added a new component, which is called Snipcart button. This component will receive a prep, which is the product itself. And if we go to the Snipcart component, it's basically a button with a class name Snipcart add item. This is pretty important because this is how Snipcart knows that this HTML element is a product. So that's all you need. And then of course, a few data attributes to define your product. So as you can see, I said the ID, name, price, and all that stuff. We do have a bunch of other attributes for like taxes, custom fields, and stuff like that, but that's all in our documentation, but I just wanted to keep it as simple as possible. And we do have this special attribute here, data-item-URL. I will go over this particularity later, but keep in mind that it's important. So if I refresh my website, I now have add to cart button. And if I click on them, we are basically there. You can add items to your cart. You can hit checkout. And again, sorry for the lag. It's my computer is not liking it when I share my screen. So yeah, that's Snipcart. So from there, everything that is going through these forms directly talks with our API. So it's not, you don't have to host a server or to handle anything.
Mm-hmm. How does just out of curiosity, in terms of how security works here, on that checkout page where it asks for your credit card field, is that on like is that using an iframe,
Yep.
or is that link out to an external page?
Yeah, it's actually an iframe that embeds the payment form. I can show it to you right here. That's the demo on the Vercel that is deployed.
Oh yeah.
So when we get to the payment form, in that case, that's a fake credit card form, but still it's embedded into an iframe. And we make very important that we use the latest versions of like Stripe, for instance. We're using Stripe elements and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's how we deal with like security. And the benefit of that is that the whole checkout experience still happens on your site. You're not redirected to like a complete checkout page where you can't change stuff in.
Yeah, yeah. I have to say the user experience of that it just seems to be very cohesive. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay, next step.
So at what point does Snipcart know about the actual product data?
When
Like,
you complete, when you complete an order, we store the products on our end for like stat generation, and we have a built-in inventory management system that works with that. And you can also fetch your products. So for instance, if all your products are on the one page, you can go to our dashboard, and we have a feature called fetch products. You enter that URL and it will automatically crawl your site, figure out all the products you have on that page, and make them available in our dashboard.
Mm-hmm. And how often does it crawl to look for new product data?
You have to do it manually, but every time an order happens, if the product was not in Snipcart, it will be created. So that's
okay, makes sense. Yeah, so you're never going to be in a case where you've like added a product to your cart that it hasn't been indexed yet.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Okay, awesome. That's cool.
So the next step is that I'm gonna add this little widget here, which is the cart, the show cart link with the items count. So to do that, I'm going to go into the global header component, which was included in the next starter kit. And I added a button in the navigation links, which has a special class here, Snipcart checkout. So any element with this CSS class will trigger the cart to open. And this span here with this class, Snipcart items count, will be automatically updated whenever items are added or removed from the cart. So if we add the item here, we can see that it's 3, 4, and I mean, pretty sure you get it. So yeah. that's how you can deal with that. But we also have like JavaScript SDK and stuff like that. So if you prefer to like create your own components relying on our JavaScript SDK, that's possible.
Nice.
But that's not an NPM. Yep.
Gotcha. Yeah. What happens if you have variations in your products, like different colors, sizes? Can you somehow? How would you handle that?
I'm gonna show you our documentation.
Okay.
for that. We do have a feature called custom fields. So basically you can add some other attributes to the buy buttons. Oh, yeah, so you can add attributes to these buttons so that you can pick colors or stuff like that. You can even change price of the products depending on the variation and stuff like that. So if you go to our documentation in product section, as you can see, we have different type of custom fields. We have drop downs that will generate a drop down in the cart item itself. So you can pick the color and stuff like that. And you can set price modifiers with these attributes here. So when you pick, for instance, the gold color, it's going to be more expensive than the black one.
Oh, that's
sweet.
cool.
You guys thought of everything.
And you can also add the text boxes, check boxes, text areas.
Oh, nice.
You can have some read-only custom fields when you want to have some information you don't want to be editable by the end user.
Yeah.
And you can combine them. Of course, you can have multiple custom fields for an item.
Yeah, and all of this data can actually, and your taxonomy of these things can actually all be set up in Agility in the actual CMS.
Yeah, exactly.
And you just pass those forwards through in the format that you need, and it just automatically works. That's
exactly.
Really cool.
Yep. Okay, so I spoke about the data item URL attribute for a bit. I'm gonna explain to you why it's that important. I mean, you could, in theory, only open your developer tools and inspect the element and change the price and try to place an order like with an invalid price. But we got it covered. Basically, because of the data item URL, what's gonna happen is that when an order is placed, we're gonna crawl back this URL and inspect the response from your server. So I'm gonna try to zoom in a bit more. So basically, we're gonna make sure that the URL is on a allowed domain, and we're gonna make a HTTP request to this URL, and then we're gonna inspect the response. If it's JSON, we're gonna use our JSON crawler. Otherwise, we're gonna just use our simple HTML crawler. And then if every information is all right and matches what's on the website, we're gonna accept the transaction. Otherwise, it's gonna be blocked. So it's not possible to like tamper with product attributes with developer tools.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering, it's like, what if someone just changes the price from like, I don't want to pay $100, I want to pay $80.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, that's a question that we have a lot on support, and I think it was important just to make that clear here.
Yeah.
So what I did actually it was Joshua's idea to do that. So I spoke with him yesterday, and he told me how he did that within another demo he write. So I decided to do the same thing. So if I open my Snipcart button here, I change the item URL to API/products. So with Next, you can create API endpoints pretty easily. So if I open pages, API, and products.js, that's a new file that I created. And this API endpoint is going to use the Agility package, NPM package, and will fetch all products through the content API, and will return a JSON file with all the products. And this format is what our JSON crawler expects. So if I open my localhost here, go to API/products, you can see that all products are in JSON right here. So that will be like my validation endpoint if you for Snipcart.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So that will be deployed automatically on Vercel. So that's it.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I really like about the Vercel platform is that like you just have a folder here for API, and it's like, all right, these things are going to be executed at runtime. Everything else is static.
Yeah, exactly. That's
and to have that all in one project is just like makes it so much easier.
Yeah, it does. Okay, so next step, we're gonna build the store section. So remember the model called products list. So we need to create this component. So I'm gonna open product list. And the first thing I did was to define the get custom initial props, which is a function offered by Agility. So basically what it does is that on the build time, that's going to run this script and like prefetch all those props so that they can be like server-side rendered, pre-rendered. So basically what I do is that I'm retrieving all products and then I'm mapping them to a property that will be available in my component, which will be called products. And to access those properties, I'm going to inject the property called custom data. This is how they will be linked to the component. And then I'm going to have access to the products property that is defined right here. So if I hit save here and I go into my products store, I can see that there are 8 products total right here. So that's nice, but we need to make it look better. So what I did is that I reused the product component that I created for the top products. So I'm simply mapping all the products right here. And then we have our store page with all the products that you can buy through Snipcart right here. And
make it look so easy.
I think that was it. So all I did to do then was to push my changes to GitHub, and then it was built by Vercel. And we do have our store on Vercel running. I can hit placeholder, wait for a few seconds because my computer is slow. And then I can open my Snipcart dashboard. As you can see,
yeah, I think that's an interesting point to make. That your Snipcart dashboard lives separately in your Snipcart.com, is it right? So you have that separate, all your orders management and all that, right? Separate from your actual content and your front end.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I'm gonna show you a bit now. I'm gonna go quickly through the dashboard because we're running out of time. But if we go to orders, so yeah, that's the Snipcart dashboard. That's the account I created for this demo. So as you can see, my order that I just placed is here. So you can open the order details. You can see everything that was purchased. You can see customer information on the right side here. You can send email to customers from the dashboard. And we do have like discounts, stuff like that. Still waiting after my computer. So you can create discounts that will like remove an amount from the order and stuff like that. We now see the products because I purchased those 3 products. So they now appear in the product listing. So you can have some hints on how they perform on your store. You can upload digital goods and then link them to a buy button. So customers purchasing digital goods receive an email with a link to download them.
Ah, that's cool.
That's cool because you can sell at that point. You can sell anything. We talked about also creating gated content. Remember that you can create a blog where you have like a button, read more, and you need to pay to read more or to download a PDF or something like that.
Yeah,
you could sell tickets.
Right, sell tickets. Yeah.
Yeah, and we do have a bunch of configuration. For example, you can enable shipping if you're selling physical products. So you can create custom shipping methods right here, free shipping. And you can say, okay, that's free. And that's it. Then your customers will have a new component in the cart, which will be shipping. So they will have to pick their shipping methods and enter a shipping address if it's different. We do have like the payment gateway section that allows you to connect the payment provider you're going to use. All the emails that are sent via Snipcart can be customized from the dashboard. So that's the invoice template here. So if you add anything.
Oh, and I see all your different language locales and things too for support.
Yeah, exactly. So cool. You can add multiple languages right here.
Nice.
So, well, I think that's about it for me, except if you have anything else you want me to show. Or...
Well, I just have a couple general questions just out of curiosity in terms of how you guys handle this. Like, how do you handle like when payments are processed by you guys? How does a customer determine whether like they want it to like only because like some customers have requirements where it's like I want to just get the person's credit card and pre-authorize it, but not necessarily capture it until I can like confirm that I like manually have enough stock in order to actually fulfill the order, and then they actually process the payment. How might something like that work in Snipcart?
Yeah, actually, at the moment, this is a setting that we can enable for some merchants, but it's not built in the dashboard. For now, whenever you place an order, it's automatically like debited on the credit card and it's paid. But we can enable this feature for customers when they ask, and then they have a button in the dashboard in the order details that says capture payment, and they can do that.
Got it. And then like how would inventory work in terms of like tracking inventory on an item, like when to show on the site that, hey, this is sold out kind of stuff?
Yeah, that will need to be handled on the site itself, because you're designing your like product details page and stuff like that. So you can use our API, or you can store the inventory in Agility if you prefer, or use our API to fetch the quantity and show like a out of stock button if you need to.
Okay.
Yeah. One interesting feature that I think you guys have is the subscriptions feature, right? So you can accept recurring payments on something. That's interesting to note, I think.
Yeah, that's a very nice feature, but it's not yet supported in the V3. But we are working.
V3. Oh, okay. I should not say anything.
Yeah. But it will be available in early 2021. That's like what the team is focusing on at the moment.
Perfect. And what about the abandoned cart feature? That's a cool feature also. Is that supported in V3?
Yes, it is.
Perfect.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, you can see the list of all your abandoned carts. You can create recovery campaigns too. This is a pretty neat feature. So for example, you want to send a discount to any customers who left some items behind in the cart. They can receive a discount after like 15 minutes, an hour, a week, and stuff like that. So it's pretty good for like conversion.
Yeah, so it's the summary is like it's pretty simple to integrate, and it's a pretty powerful solution for e-commerce where you can get like a bunch of features that that you would expect from any e-commerce. So it's not that because it's simple you are missing out on a bunch of things that you would need or expect from an e-commerce. That's something to keep in mind.
Exactly. I think that because it's so simple to integrate, there are a lot of people that think it's only suited for like small shops selling one product or stuff like that. But we do have customers with like huge catalog of products, thousands of products, and they've been running on Snipcart for years now, and it's going well.
Yeah, and you have different languages. You can customize your custom payment methods, and so it's a pretty powerful solution, I would say. Nice.
Yeah, I know. I'm impressed.
Yeah, same.
And I think the little sort of tutorial we put together here on like using Next.js and Vercel and Snipcart. I think we're actually probably going to take that and launch our own swag shop so that we can make it easier to ship out swag to people that want to buy stuff. So we might actually get to use it ourselves.
But I don't want to take much credit because Joshua already did like a starter kit, so I just use most of the code he wrote. But I wrote it on my hand just to make sure that I understood everything. But yeah, I want to thank him.
Yeah, well, shout out to Joshua.
Yay, Joshua.
He's all right. Well, if that's it, I'm just checking the chat here if we've got any sort of pending questions, but it looks like they've mostly been answered.
Yeah, I think there's just Francois that is trolling me, but I'm used to that, so that's okay.
His commentary is awesome.
I just want to mention, you guys have a great article in Agility's blog about integrating all this, so that's also a great resource to read for.
Yes, and please, everyone, if you haven't already, take a moment to join our Agility CMS Slack community. We're continuing to get more people in every day, and it's just a great spot to, if you're new to Jamstack, you're new to Agility, or hey, if you're giving Snipcart a try too, join our Slack channel. Let us know if you have any questions, feedback, and now we're actually in very close contact with Snipcart too, so I'm sure we can continue to work together.
Sure. Great.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. Is there anything else that you want to add, Charles or Flora?
I'm good.
Yeah, same. Hope to see you guys soon. And yeah, go implement some e-commerce in Agility with Snipcart.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah,
thank
you very much.
Remember the save and stack.
Yes. Bye, guys. Take care.
All right.
Stay safe.
Ciao.
Bye.
Bye, everyone. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.